April 12, 1945, 10,000 feet above Okinawa. The air was a trembling sheet of humidity rising from the Ryukyu chain, thick, shimmering, and buzzing with the distant rumble of naval gunfire. Storm clouds hung low over the sea, bruised purple by smoke from burning ships. A hot wind pushed across the sky, carrying the residue of cordite and salt. Below, the Battle of Okinawa raged with a violence unseen in the Pacific. Through that chaotic sky thundered a squadron of F4U Corsairs, their bent wings slicing the air like steel scythes. Among them, flying lead for VF-17's forward patrol, was Lieutenant Samuel Hawk Delaney, age 24, born in the dry hills of Bakersfield, California. A farm kid who grew up racing pickup trucks across dirt roads, he now commanded a 2,000-horsepower beast that could climb, dive, and accelerate like no aircraft he had ever dreamed of. Yet even inside this legendary fighter, he felt a knot tightening inside his ribcage. Today, they were hunting. But they were also being hunted. Delaney's gloved hand hovered over the throttle quadrant, fingers brushing the warm metal. The Pratt Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp rattled beneath him, delivering a bass-throated growl that vibrated through the cockpit frame. His canopy glass was streaked with salt residue, and the late afternoon sun glinted off the long blue nose of his Corsair as he scanned the sky. To the east lay a smear of black smoke rising from a U.S. destroyer. Another kamikaze hit. To the west, faint specks danced in the sunlit haze. Zeros. 6 of them, flying tight and confident, the way only pilots convinced of their superiority dared to fly. Hawk could almost hear their mockery echoing across the sky, a sentiment that Japanese fighter units had repeated for months. Corsairs can't turn. They fight like heavy iron. Attack them in a horizontal circle. They cannot follow. And in a turning fight, they were right. The Zero could pirouette inside a Corsair's arc with frightening elegance. But Lieutenant Delaney wasn't here to dance horizontally. He clicked the radio. "Blackjack Squadron, keep altitude. Do not engage in turns. We're going vertical today." His wingmen acknowledged, their voices tight, controlled. Every pilot knew what he meant. The Corsair's true weapon wasn't its turning radius. It was its power dive, the moment when gravity and horsepower merged into one unstoppable, predatory plunge that no Zero on Earth could match. Below them, the enemy formation shifted, angling toward the patrol. Hawk caught the glint from their cowlings, sunlight flashing like small mirrors. The Zeros were closing fast, Hawk's breathing slowed. Let them come. Let them feel confident. The Zeros began their classical approach, a wide, sweeping turn meant to bleed the Corsair's speed and drag them into a circular knife fight. It was a move practiced thousands of times across the Pacific, the same maneuver that had shredded slower, heavier American fighters earlier in the war. But this wasn't 1942. This wasn't Guadalcanal. And the aircraft in Hawk's hands wasn't a Wildcat. It was a bent-winged monster built for vertical murder. As the first Zeros dipped into their turn, Hawk pushed his throttle forward. The engine roared. His Corsair surged upward into a steep climb. The G-forces dug into his spine, his vision tightening momentarily as the sky tilted. "Climb with me. Don't look back," he ordered. Below, confused Japanese pilots tightened their spirals, expecting the Americans to follow, and when they didn't, the Zeros overshot the Corsairs completely, ending up ahead, low and bleeding speed. It was exactly what Hawk wanted. At the apex of his climb, 10,200 feet, he rolled the Corsair inverted. The world flipped, sea above him, sky below. Then gravity seized the aircraft like a fist. He dove. The Corsair dropped like a guillotine blade. Wind screamed past the canopy. The airframe shuddered as he hurtled beyond 400 mph. Zeros wheeled below, now trapped in their own momentum, unable to climb, unable to accelerate quickly enough to escape the falling hammer descending upon them. Inside his cockpit, Hawk felt the vibration of the 50 calibers before he even pulled the trigger. 1-0 hung in the sky, stalled mid-turn, nose up, wings wobbling helplessly. A perfect, suspended target. Hawk exhaled. He fired. 6 Browning machine guns vomited flame. Tracers ripped downward like burning spears, stitching across the Zero's fuselage. The enemy fighter erupted into a blossom of fire and debris, spinning into the blue void beneath. Hawk didn't celebrate. He simply rolled into another dive, because more Zeros were hanging there, stalled, helpless, about to suffer the same fate. The Predator had entered the kill zone. The lead Zero disintegrated into a falling flame, and Lieutenant Hawk Delaney leveled out from the dive with a violent jolt. The Corsair's wings shuddered under compression, the air still roaring around him like a hurricane trapped in steel. His altimeter spun downward, 9,000 feet, 8,500, 8,000, as the battlefield widened below into a canvas of smoke and sunlight. But this was only the beginning. Ahead of him, 4 more A6M Zeros floated in the sky like broken kites. Their pilots had tried to force tighter turns, expecting their signature agility to win the engagement. Instead, they found themselves at the limits of their lift, engines screaming, wings buffeting, and airspeed collapsing. They were suspended, caught in a moment of aerodynamic helplessness. Hawk's voice crackled over the radio. "Blackjack Squadron, take them now, one at a time. Stay vertical. Do not chase their turns. Dive, strike, climb again." His pilots echoed the command with a mix of adrenaline and fear. The Corsair was a brute. It punished mistakes. But flown correctly, in a vertical battle, it became a weapon the Japanese had not yet learned to counter. To the Japanese formation below, the situation became suddenly, brutally clear. The Americans weren't turning. They weren't losing speed. They were attacking from above, again and again. One Japanese lieutenant, flying a scarred A6M5 with faded cherry blossom decals, yanked hard on his stick, attempting to reverse direction. The Zero's nose snapped upward, but the engine coughed under the strain. His airspeed plummeted. He felt the left wing shudder. He was stalling, and through his canopy he saw it. A dark blue silhouette growing rapidly larger, framed by the afternoon sun. A Corsair, diving straight at him. The lieutenant's breath caught. He jammed the throttle forward. Too late. The Corsair howled past him with predatory speed. A burst of 50 caliber fire tore across his right wing, shredding fabric, ripping through spars, sending fragments spiraling away like autumn leaves. He felt his aircraft lurch violently. Oil sprayed across his windshield. Behind him, another Zero stalled mid-climb, wobbling like a drunk bird. That one belonged to Sergeant Nakamori, a veteran of Rabaul. He had fought Wildcats, P-40s, even Hellcats. But he had never seen a fighter move like this. Upward like a rocket, downward like a falling star. He shouted into his radio, "They are not following the turn. They are diving from above. Again. Again." But his warning drowned beneath the thunder of another descending Corsair. Lieutenant James Reaper Nolan dropped into the kill like an executioner, his F4U slicing through a curtain of haze at nearly 420 mph. Nolan's silver visor reflected the sunlight as he lined up on the stalled Zero. He fired a 1-second burst. The bullet struck the Zero's engine cowling. A flash, a bloom. Then a tearing fireball that burst outward like a blooming sun. Pieces of metal and burning fuel spiraled downward, leaving Nakamori's fate sealed before he even had time to curse. Back in his cockpit, Hawk surged out of his first attack and pulled the Corsair upward again, using raw engine power to regain altitude. His stomach compressed as G-forces slammed him into his harness. He could hear his own pulse thudding in his ears. He reached 9,500 feet before rolling level, searching. 2 more Zeros were trying to flee southward toward Okinawa's coast, but their airspeed was pitiful. Their pilots were panicking, abandoning the turning fight entirely. It didn't matter. They had already bled too much energy. Behind Hawk, his wingman, Ensign David "Kid" Granger, young, nervous, barely 20, pushed his throttle forward and dove after one fleeing Zero. The world blurred into streaks of color outside his canopy. "Easy, Kid. Don't overcorrect," Hawk called. But Kid was finding something he hadn't expected. The Corsair felt alive in the dive. Stable, predictable, powerful, a flying anvil in a world of paper airplanes. He lined up the Zero in his sights, watching the Pipper drift across the enemy's tailplane. The Japanese pilot tried to corkscrew desperately, but the Zero simply couldn't accelerate fast enough. Kid squeezed the trigger. The Corsair's 650 cals unleashed bright lances of flame. Rounds struck the Zero's fuselage, sawing it from canopy to tail. The enemy fighter burst into white flame and peeled downward, trailing smoke that curved like a dying serpent into the sea. Kid whispered, almost in disbelief, "Hawk, I got him." Hawk felt a rare smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "Good kill. Now climb." But the battle wasn't over. Ahead, Hawk spotted movement. 3 more Zeros diving out of the sun, reinforcements rushing to avenge their fallen comrades. And this time, the Japanese formation wasn't mocking. This time they were angry and dangerously coordinated. Hawk adjusted his grip on the stick. Round 2 begins. The 3 Zeros thundered downward from the sun, their engines screaming, their formation tighter and more disciplined than the previous wave. These weren't green pilots pulled from training units. They moved with intent, precision, and perfect timing. Their leader's aircraft bore a red lightning stripe along the fuselage, a mark belonging to the 343rd Kokutai, some of the best remaining fighter units Japan had left. Lieutenant Hawk Delaney felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. These pilots weren't here to test the Americans. They weren't here to scare them. They were here to kill the Corsairs. He keyed his mic. "All units, spread climbing. Do not meet them head-on." The Corsairs responded immediately, each pilot braking upward and outward. It wasn't a defensive maneuver. Hawk was setting the stage for another vertical ambush, but the Zero leader anticipated it. He yanked his own fighter upward in a spiraling climb, trying to intercept Hawk's ascent, cutting inside the Corsair's climb path. The Zero's design, lightweight, perfectly balanced, allowed it to perform this maneuver with alarming agility. Inside the Japanese cockpit, the ace pilot narrowed his eyes. He had heard the rumors. The Americans were using vertical attacks, but he believed his skill and the Zero's superior low-speed handling could counter it. He tightened his spiral, closing the distance on Hawk's climbing F4U. Hawk checked his mirrors. Damn, he's good. The Japanese ace was gaining altitude faster than expected. The Zero's nose pitched perfectly, tracing Hawk's climb, closing to within 60 yards. Too close. Hawk shoved his throttle forward. Every cylinder in the R2800 snarled with raw force. The Corsair climbed harder, but he felt the airspeed bleed away. The nose grew heavy, the controls sluggish. He was nearing stall, and the Zero behind him? It wasn't stalling. It was rising gracefully, like a bird ascending toward prey. Hawk knew he had seconds, maybe less. Before the Zero reached firing position, he whispered to himself, "You're not winning this in the climb, so stop climbing." He kicked full left rudder. The Corsair snapped sideways, rolling out of the vertical climb and pitching downward in a half spin. The Japanese ace overshot by mere feet, his tracers ripping through empty sky where Hawk had been an instant earlier. The Corsair dropped out of sight. Hawk let the aircraft fall, nose down, wings trembling, into the beginning of a vertical dive. Altitude vanished. The air thickened. The double Wasp shrieked as the Corsair clawed for speed. Within seconds, the F4U accelerated past 300 mph, then 350, then 380. Gravity welcomed the monster it had helped create. The Zero leader tried to follow. He shoved his stick forward, engine roaring, wings slicing into the dive. But this was where the difference emerged. The Zero could not dive safely past 350 mph. Its airframe vibrated violently. Its control surfaces stiffened. And at speeds beyond 380 mph, a Zero could literally tear itself apart. But the Corsair, it was built for this. By the time Hawk stabilized into a controlled dive, the Zero had already fallen 400 yards behind, unable to keep up. The Japanese pilot felt his wings trembling, his vertical control vanishing. He pulled back to avoid structural failure. But that doomed him to one outcome. He would never catch the Corsair. Hawk rolled out of the dive at 8,000 feet, adrenaline surging, lungs tight. "Blackjack Squadron, regroup on me. We're about to take the rest of them." To his right, 2 Corsairs, Reaper and Kid, fell into formation, their bent wings catching the afternoon light, turning the sky into a mosaic of blue steel. But 2 Zeros remained in fighting shape, and they came in fast, skimming low across the ocean, their contrails leaving faint white scratches against the haze. "Let them come," Hawk muttered. The Zeros surged forward, guns flashing, trying to force the Corsairs into a horizontal turning fight. Their tactics were sharp, aggressive, and desperate. Nose to nose, the enemy leader committed fully, trying to bait Hawk into a wide circle that would bleed the Corsair's energy. For a moment, it looked like Hawk would take the turn. Then, he didn't. He pulled the Corsair straight upward, the engine bellowing as he launched into another vertical climb. Again, the Zeros committed to the turn. Again, their wings shuddered with strain. Again, their airspeed died. This time, Hawk didn't wait for the stall. At the top of his climb, he pushed the Corsair inverted and rolled it into a perfect diving angle. His gun sight descended across the stalled Zero like a slow-moving eclipse. He fired. His tracers connected, exploding across the Zero's cockpit. The canopy burst outward. A plume of flame consumed the fuselage. The aircraft spun into a burning corkscrew toward the sea. "Zero down," Hawk called. But the last Japanese pilot refused to flee. He banked hard, lined up, behind Kid's Corsair, and fired a burst. Kid's left stabilizer sparked. The Zero was closing in, perfectly positioned to kill. Hawk saw it happen, and he dove. Hawk saw the last Zero slip behind Kid's Corsair, its guns blinking with murderous intent. He didn't think. He reacted. His muscles moved before his mind caught up, slamming the stick forward and rolling the aircraft into a steep, predatory dive. The Corsair dipped under the sunlight like a falling blade. Wind hammered the canopy. The propeller blurred into an invisible disk. The engine howled with a ferocity that seemed almost alive. Hawk's blood pounded through his ears as gravity pressed him deep into his seat. The dive steepened. His altimeter spun like a clock gone insane. "Too fast," a voice whispered at the back of his mind. "Too steep." He ignored it. Below him, Kid Granger fought for survival. The young pilot jerked his Corsair left, then right. But the Zero clung to him like a shadow. The Japanese pilot, calm, disciplined, held his fire until he was inside 200 yards. He wasn't wasting bullets. He was lining up a perfect killing shot. The Zero's nose twitched. Its guns flared. Tracers whipped past Kid's tail. "Come on, Kid. Hold him just another second," Hawk muttered. But Kid wasn't hearing anything. His breath was ragged. His gloves trembled on the stick. "He's going to kill me," Kid thought as the Zero closed the distance. "He's faster at this speed. He's inside my turn. I can't shake him." "Kid!" Hawk barked into the radio. "Don't run. Don't turn. Climb." Kid's eyes widened. Climbing now? At this airspeed? With a Zero glued to his tail? But he trusted Hawk more than he trusted his own instincts. Kid jerked the nose upward. The Corsair lurched violently, its wings groaning as it clawed toward the sky. Airspeed bled instantly. Kid felt his stomach drop, felt the world tilt. The Zero, lighter and designed for tight maneuvering, followed him up the climb. For a moment, it seemed the Japanese pilot had anticipated Hawk's trick. Except he hadn't, because Hawk wasn't done falling. Through the Zero's canopy, the Japanese pilot suddenly glimpsed movement. A streak of deep navy blue descending straight at him like a falling meteor. Hawk Delaney. The Corsair barreled toward him with more than 400 mph of closure. The Japanese pilot's instincts screamed. He rolled right, too slow. He pushed throttle, too late. His aircraft, nose up and nearly stalling, was the perfect target. Hawk aligned the pipper across the Zero's spine. He felt time slow down. Every vibration of the cockpit, every rivet humming in the wings, every breath burning in his chest. He squeezed the trigger. The Corsair unleashed a tidal roar. 650 cals firing at once, their combined thunder shaking Hawk's bones. Tracers carved a straight path through the Zero's fuselage. The first hit detonated the engine. The second sheared off the cockpit side. The third tore the tail free in a burst of fire. The Zero came apart mid-air. A violent, fiery spray of metal fragments and black smoke spiraling downward toward the ocean. Kid gasped. "Jesus, Hawk, you saved my life." Hawk didn't answer immediately. He pulled out of the dive, altitude stabilizing at 6,500 feet. His hands were trembling, not from fear, from the adrenaline storm raging in his bloodstream. Behind him, the sky grew disturbingly quiet. Reaper, Kid, and the remaining Corsairs circled up, reforming the battered squadron. 8 Zeros had attacked. 8 Zeros had died. And not a single American pilot had been lost. But victories like this never felt like triumph. Not up here. Not surrounded by smoke trails and falling wreckage. Hawk took a long breath, the tension deepening the lines around his eyes. "Blackjack Squadron," he said softly. "Return to Capline. The fleet still needs us." He turned his Corsair southward. The others followed. Beneath them, debris from the final Zero floated on the wind. Embers spiraling gently toward the sea, fading into the Pacific like dying fireflies. Yet Hawk felt something else lingering in the air. A message. A warning. A truth every surviving Japanese pilot would whisper after this day. Do not mock the Corsair. Do not turn with it. When it goes vertical, you are already dead. But fate wasn't done testing Hawk Delaney, nor was the sky finished taking its toll. Ahead lay the final chapter of the day, a confrontation not against enemy aircraft, but against the war itself. The Pacific horizon stretched before them, a haze of drifting smoke and distant fire. The squadron leveled out at 8,000 feet, the roar of combat fading into a deep, unsettling silence. All that remained was the muted hum of engines and the trembling echo of adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Below, Okinawa burned. Columns of smoke rose from ships struck by kamikazes. Beaches churned beneath artillery fire. Hundreds of landing craft swarmed the coastline like tiny silver beetles. Hawk Delaney steadied his breathing, trying to release the tension welded into his muscles. But the war would not loosen its grip so easily. "Kid, how's your bird holding up?" he asked, forcing calm into his voice. Kid Granger glanced at his stabilizer, half shredded, edges curled like torn paper. Fuel dripped in thin, flickering shimmers from a ruptured line. His hands were still shaking. "Hurting, but she's flying. I can make it back," he replied. Reaper cut in. "You keep letting Zeros chase you, kid. Your Corsair's gonna be the most ventilated thing in the fleet." A weak laugh drifted through the comms. It was the first moment of warmth they had felt all day. Yet Hawk couldn't shake the weight settling in his chest. As they flew their cap line, the sun dipped toward the horizon, bleeding gold across the shattered remains of the battlefield. Wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of explosions from the front lines. Each boom thudded through Hawk's bones like distant thunder. He thought of the Zero pilots, young, skilled, proud, many barely older than Kid. They had been told the Corsair was clumsy, that it couldn't turn, that its heavy frame made it easy prey in a dogfight. But those beliefs died today, in falling fire, torn metal, and the hard reality of physics. It wasn't hatred Hawk felt. It wasn't triumph. It was sorrow, and a deep, stirring respect. Suddenly, a voice crackled over their radios, the carrier fleet calling for immediate coverage. Radar showed a suspicious cluster of low, fast contacts approaching from the north. Possibly more kamikazes, possibly more fighters. Hawk looked at his fuel gauge. Low. Kid's was worse. Reaper wasn't much better. But orders were orders, and the fleet had no one else close enough to intercept. "Blackjack Squadron," Hawk said. "We're responding. Titan formation." Kid hesitated. "Hawk, my plane might not hold if we have to fight again." Hawk's voice softened. "We fly back together. We fight together. And we survive together. That's how it's always been." He paused. "And we're going home today. All of us." Kid swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." They turned north. The Corsair's engines thundered as they climbed back into the dimming sky, sunlight catching on their bent wings like gold brushed across blue steel. Every pilot felt exhaustion seeping into their bones. But they also felt something else rising, the knowledge that they were part of a new kind of aerial war. One defined not by turning circles, but by vertical dominance, by energy, by speed, by the brutal physics of gravity itself. And it was here, over Okinawa, that the Japanese learned the truth. The Corsair wasn't the clumsy brute they once mocked. It wasn't a sluggish iron bird. It was a predator. A machine that thrived in the vertical realm. A machine that turned Zeros into helpless silhouettes hanging in the sky. A machine that, when guided by pilots like Hawk Delaney, was nothing short of unstoppable. As the squadron approached the northern sector, Hawk looked to his right, meeting the gaze of Kid Granger through the sunlit canopy. The young pilot managed a weary smile. Hawk returned it with one of his own. They had survived today. They had bent gravity to their will. They had rewritten the balance of the air war. And when the history of Okinawa was later studied, when veterans shared their stories, when surviving Japanese pilots spoke of that day, they all repeated the same line: "Do not turn with a Corsair. Do not chase it up. Do not try to follow it down. When the bird goes vertical, the battle is already lost. Hawk throttled forward. The Corsairs climbed. The sky darkened. Their war wasn't over, but their legend had just begun.